Welcome back to our day 3 of the Online Equity Conference. We are delighted to have our next presenters here with us, Dr. Denise Maduli-Williams and Dr. Stefanie Johnson-Shipman from San Diego Miramar College. And they'll be talking about equitable course design through accessibility, student support, and communication, all extremely important topics. But before I pass the mic over to them, just to go over a few logistics, I see that a lot of you are already connecting in the chat, which is great. You can put questions in the chat. I'll be moderating this session and can punt them over to the presenters. I'm sure they'll be checking out the chat as well. We are recording the session. These recordings will be available on our YouTube channel, and I'll post the link to that at the end of the session. Of course, you can enable captions or the live transcript below in Zoom at the bottom toolbar. And that's all. With that, our lovely presenters.
All right. Hi, everyone, and good morning, and very early good morning to some people around the world. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Denise Maduli-Williams. I am a professor of English and ELAC, which is what we call ESOL at Miramar College, English Language Acquisition, and I'm also the online accessibility mentor. And if I were to have any animal pet size, I think I would have a giraffe. Thank you to Stefanie for this awesome icebreaker, and I'll throw it over to you, Stefanie.
Thank you. I'm Stefanie, and similar to Denise, I teach English and ELAC at Miramar College. I also am involved with online faculty teaching and our poker review, and all sorts of fun stuff. And if I could have any animal as a pet size that would just like love me and not attack me, it would definitely be a tiger. I love tigers. I love all the big cats, but tigers are my favorite. And I love seeing your responses come in. They're so fun. Another big a puma, mountain lion, love it. So thank you for all the shares. It's really fun, and keep bringing them in if you feel comfortable sharing. I will try to advance the slide. Here we go. And so quick agenda, we'll start with some syllabus tips. We have information on communication plans, accessibility statements, and then we'll go into 2 Canvas tips. One is about integrating student support services, and the other is about using high color contrast and avoiding color alone as an accessibility indicator. So thank you for being here. And I have the first one, so I'll just keep on rolling. So I think a lot of us know, especially if you're in the online education field, that regular effective contact is required for all online courses. So how do we communicate with students? We are not distance education or correspondence courses, rather, where we just put materials for them to receive and they give it back to us. It should be much more interactive, and it is a requirement. So I like to look at communication in 4 main ways, and these are based on the OEI CVC Peer Online Course Review rubric. The most current one, they are doing a revision. So that's where I get these 4 categories and the 4 ways that we can look at communication. And so the first way to look at one of the communication aspects is with professor-initiated contact with students. So this is how you as an instructor are going to be reaching out to your students. So before we even get to the communication plan and our syllabi, we want to think about what we prefer and how we want to communicate with our students. So a question to ask yourself is how and how frequently will you contact all the students in your classes? Common ways include Canvas announcements throughout the week. Maybe you're going to do a brief welcome video each week. Do you prefer emails or maybe instant messaging like Pronto? For me personally, I like everything in Canvas because my campus and district email gets a little wild, and so it's easy to miss student emails. So I really prefer students to reach out to me in Canvas. So whatever method you prefer, just let your students know. Then you also want to think about how will you reach out to individual students. Perhaps you notice a student has missed a couple assignments or they missed their first major project. How are you going to reach out to them? What is your plan for that? The other element to consider with communication is how students will reach out to you. And so if they need help, and they have a question, what is the best way for them to reach you? And I think a lot of us do this already. It's just trying to be more intentional and bring this to the forefront of our online classes to make it more equitable. But some questions to consider for the second type: what is the best way for students to get contact with you? And when can they expect a response? For me personally, I try to respond within 24 hours during the week, about 48 hours during the weekend, and I implore students to please follow up if I haven't responded in that time, just because I tell them that they are important to me, their questions are important to me, and I don't want to miss anything that they are asking me or reaching out about. So how can they best get in contact with you? As another personal example, I don't really use the instant messengers like Pronto and Canvas. Not any profound or deep reason, it's just my preference. Of course, if a student reaches out that way, I will respond, but I'm mostly looking for student contact and communication in my Canvas messages. And we're all different, so it's just thinking about what we prefer. The third category of communication is student contact among each other. And so this is how you facilitate that peer-to-peer connection, that community in the online space. So how will you encourage meaningful, feel-good connection and interactions between students all semester? And I put all in bold because I think a lot of online faculty do a great job with icebreakers and community builders at the start of the semester. And let's keep that going all semester long. It's more than just fun, right? Clearly, I like icebreakers and community, but it also really creates a connection among students that is powerful. Another important thing to keep in mind for this is you don't have to make a new discussion board every week, or you don't have to create an elaborate video assignment to build this into your classes. For example, in your content area, maybe you include a question in a discussion board about personal connections to the material. Maybe it's similar to something they've learned before or another class, or it connects to their life or future in some way. Also, these get to know you prompts don't just have to be in the beginning part of the semester. Maybe around the mid-semester where everyone's a little stressed, you throw in a question in your discussion board. What's something positive that happened to you recently? Or what's a win you've had? What is the last thing you watched on Netflix or a good book you read, right? These don't have to be elaborate, connecting, separate assignments. You can build them into what you're already doing. Another good one to build community and trust among students is to share tips, especially before a major test or maybe before they turn in their first paper. What are some strategies that they're using to study and to really build that collaboration rather than the sort of competitive space in the online? How can we help support each other? So that's among students. The last category is how students can reach out to one another. So the difference on the one I just showed is that you as the instructor are creating these opportunities. You're building them in intentionally into your existing course structure online. This category is about how, if Denise and I are classmates, if I want to find out, I can't just ask her in the hallway, right? How can I reach out to this person who shares a love of giraffes like me, right? We want to talk about that together. So how can students ask a question or start a conversation with peers? A really common one is discussion boards, a separate one, either a student lounge or a Q&A forum. So you want to make that clear to your students and also think about your role. So if you don't really plan to be in the student discussion board, the open-ended, just let them know, right? This is for you. I don't really monitor it too much. Or if they can expect that you jump in every now and then, just let them know. So you think about all those ahead of time and then you put it together. So once you develop your approach for all four, just share this information with your students. Of course, the syllabus or orientation module, if you do a syllabus quiz, that's a great place to put it. But also remind students of the communication expectations throughout the semester. So a lot of times we front load at the start of the semester, great, but let's remind students of our intentionality and building these communications in supportive ways. Perhaps you use announcements. I love announcements. I send multiple a week. So just adding a note in the announcement, say, hey, remember we're replying to a peer. It's important to connect with each other to drive the conversation forward. So you kind of give them the reason you're doing what you do. Also, when grade feedback is posted or available, as a writing instructor, that's such an important part for me that I communicate with students. And then also, if you are going to be more active in the question and answer student forum or student lounge, sometimes I'll say, oh, I have a fun question in there. Go check it out if you want to see what some of your peers have said. So here's a sample from mine, and we will put the link for the slides in the chat. So I know it might be hard to see, but I break it down to communication. This is my actual syllabus, what to expect. So I let students know what they can expect from me and what I kind of expect from them, because I love those announcements. So I say, please check the weekly announcements, read and watch the materials, and all that good stuff, and return to the discussion board. So that's a sample. Again, it might be small, but we have the slide in the chat, and that is a live link to one of my past syllabi. And I'll turn it over to Denise.
Thanks, Stefanie. I did throw those slides in there. It's nice to have them right at the beginning of our presentation in terms of a nice accessibility practice, because it's easier sometimes for people to see that on their own devices and follow along. As we move over to talk a little bit about accessibility, I wanted to start off with one of my favorite visuals, which is the curb cut. Now, this was initially used, of course, for access for wheelchairs or anyone who needs that support. But we know now how great that is for everyone, that it helps parents with strollers, it helps someone rolling in their luggage, it could help someone with a shopping cart. So thinking about this in terms of our classes and knowing that when we design with usability and accessibility in mind, it gives all of our students the opportunity to learn more effectively. So this section, I wanted to talk about highlighting accessibility in our accessibility statements. This is something so small, but it's critical. It's often the first impression students will get about our approach to accessibility and inclusion. Some of us might send a message out to students early on with a link to a web-based syllabus, or we have our Canvas course open and they can check into the syllabus. And right away, the way we talk about accessibility gives students that first impression. So we want to use a welcoming and personal tone and language. And I'll show some examples. I always tell people, as online accessibility mentor, I'm basically sharing all the things I did wrong for many years, but we don't know what we don't know. And I had a very cold kind of default statement, and making it more welcoming and personal really matters. The second bullet is to highlight it early in the syllabus. Thanks, Stefanie. I had mine buried. It was probably the last thing, and it was just a little bullet at the end. It was super hard to find and just not at all. It was definitely looked at as an afterthought. So highlighting it early at the forefront so students know this is foundational to our courses is really important. And on to the next bullet. The other thing we can do is make it a dedicated section. A lot of us might be having what's called a liquid syllabus or a web-based syllabus. And again, I used to have an accessibility statement kind of buried at the end. Now I have its own dedicated section where I talk about accessibility practices, how to reach the office, and then how I really strive to make my work as accessible as possible for all students. A lot of us do have a statement, a broader statement about equity and inclusion, but we can't have equity and inclusion without accessibility. So including accessibility as part of our broader statements is really helpful as well. The other thing that's really nice is to include a question about accessibility in an opening survey. A lot of us do kind of a getting to know you survey for students, and having a question there lets us know that let students know we're listening to them, that we want to know about any opportunities that we can do to make the course more inclusive for them. So that's something I've added to my own survey, and I have a couple examples of questions to show you in a few slides. So here's my before and after. I think I got this accessibility statement, I don't know, how syllabi are passed down generation by generation. And this was kind of the default statement from my department that I copied and pasted and buried at the end of my syllabus. And it's there, right? It's kind of compliance focused, letting students know that they have to do it in 2 weeks, and that here's where you go in the office and just, kind of go handle it yourself. And then I have a new improved statement on the next slide. So I want to highlight a couple things I put into the statement. I started off with that it's important to me that this course is accessible to all students, including students with disabilities. And then I went on to say that if you encounter a problem accessing any portion of this course, please contact me. So this kind of shows them that this is a real partnership we all work really hard to make sure our Canvas course is accessible, that our emails and our announcements, everything's accessible. But there are times that the link didn't work. And there are times that the image didn't have alt text and I didn't know. So letting students know that it's okay for them to tell me is really helpful. I also let them know that I look forward to meeting their accommodations. I have a very good friend that I was just talking to. Her student has an accommodation letter and she was getting enrolled for her college classes. And she had so much anxiety about sending this accommodation letter to her professors and finding out if it was going to be okay. And it shouldn't be like that. I want them to know that I'm looking forward to supporting them. So it's the same idea, but a completely different impact by letting students know that we have a human-centered approach to supporting them. And this also lets students know that if they didn't know about, the DSPS office, that they can also initiate their own accommodation. The last thing I wanted to point out was the two types of questions that I toggle back and forth and add to my Getting to Know You survey. The first one gives some examples there, such as captions and videos, time for breaks. That might help students who hadn't considered their accessibility needs to have some examples of what they might need. And then the second one is just more open-ended. Students have said things to me about their long commutes, about their parent and caregiving responsibilities, about their Wi-Fi connection. So all of these things let me be better in terms of providing accessibility for my students, but also sometimes no one puts anything or there's not that many, and that's okay because it lets students at least know that I'm listening and that they're cared for and that that question is there for them.
All right, thank you, Denise. And I really just want to emphasize that what Denise is sharing, you can just build on what you have, right? So it's not making a whole new discussion or activity for accessibility. She embeds it really well in her existing approaches. So I hope that's something that can be taken away from the session. So now we're going to turn to Canvas tips. So small things we can do in our Canvas shells and our online courses to be more equitable and inclusive. And so I'm going to talk about integrating student support services into the online class. And as many of you probably know, online students must have access to the same student support services as our face-to-face students or in-person students, whether that's the library, counseling, tutoring, DSPS support, all of those wonderful services so many of our California community college campuses have. They need to have those online. So whether they're fully online or coming on campus just a couple times a week, we really need to make sure we have these services. And I think a lot of colleges, or I hope a lot of colleges, have these already. So many faculty include this information in their syllabus or orientation modules already. Great places. And again, to highlight what Denise was sharing, even DSPS, right, it might be in there. We can make it more intentional. So those are wonderful places to start. But similar to my earlier tip, we want to be intentional and continuous with our reminders and supporting these types of supports and activities students can engage with that we know will help their success. So remind students of these services throughout the semester and normalize the use of support. For English and writing, which is our area, sometimes students feel nervous or they have anxiety about the writing and they don't want to go to tutoring because it can have a bad reputation. Oh, you need to go to tutoring. You need to go to math tutoring. And so a lot of our writing courses is just normalizing that we all benefit from another set of eyes and review. So really, how can we normalize whether it's getting help from a librarian through email, or if it's using mental health services so we have online access to, how can we normalize getting support? Because we all need help sometimes. And it's really important that students feel comfortable to take advantage of what we have. So for your Canvas design, how you're designing your course, a good question to keep in mind is consider when students might most need a resource. So for example, if you have an exam coming up, that might be a helpful time to remind students of the study groups or online tutoring available at your campus. For English, I'm always promoting our online tutoring services. Maybe it's the midterm time of the semester and students are feeling stressed out. You're reading it in their responses or in their discussions. That would probably be a good time to remind them of the mental health services available. Right now, our college is opening their fall schedule. So this is a great time to remind students of general counseling, which we also have online Zoom appointments for students for. So just thinking about when students might need these targeted supports and then being intentional about putting them in your Canvas. And so that's another big thing for me is that try to have this information directly in Canvas whenever possible. Try to minimize students having to go visit this website, click on this tab and all of these elements. If we can put everything they need or as much as they can use within our Canvas shell to avoid them having to take these extra steps to go out, I think that's really important and can help them use these services a little bit more because they don't have additional hoops or windows or browsers to open in the process. So try to make these materials easy to find. A good tip is just to put your Canvas on the student view and then try to see your course from the eyes of the student. So what do they see first? Is tutoring buried down in your syllabus, or does it have its own section in the module that you are in? So here's an example, as I shared, I love announcements. This was from fall. It was a reminder, it was an 8-week class, so don't freak out if you see a paper in week 3. It was only an 8-week class, but I just have an entire announcement. Reminder, send your paper 1 draft in for tutoring feedback. And I greet them, and then I remind students of the benefit of tutoring. And I say, hey, our college makes this pretty easy. There's information in this week's module. Here's a link to our help and resource folder. I give them the timeline so they know what to expect. If you use this Canvas remote tutoring, you send in your paper. It's not instant, but usually it only takes a day or 2 during the week, right? I give them a recommended due date. And then I also remind them of our live online Zoom tutoring we have on campus. And because this is an online class, I kind of promote the remote type of tutoring where they get that feedback sent to them. But I say, hey, we're also, if you're near campus, if you're here for your math class, pop into the writing center, we're here. And then finally, I remind students your paper does not have to be long. It doesn't have to be complete. You just want to send it in and get some initial feedback. Tutoring is valuable for all stages of the writing process, so just send it in. Another example, this is from a week 7 screenshot. If you look under my section, week 7 research paper, I have a tab, tutoring for your RP, your research paper. And so it has its own item that they mark as done. I remind them of our tutoring center called the Academic Success Center. I've copied and pasted the directions. You'll see that the links are not descriptive and not accessible. I let the tutoring coordinator know, but I give them all the information, including for in-person tutoring, the hours, where it's located, and just anything they might need to know to go and use those services. And I still remind them, before they turn in their final paper, there's a tab that they can open. Hey, did you use tutoring? One more chance, like anything is good. We were talking before the session started, Denise and I finished our doctorates not that long ago. And I use tutoring. I use my university writing center. Sometimes I'll show them my marked up paper and we all laugh because it's hard to find our own errors or mistakes or opportunities. So really just try to humanize and normalize using student services. And next we have Denise for another Canvas tip.
Sure. I always giggle with that because there's nothing more humbling than writing as an English professor and having to get all of those notes and revisions back. Okay, so I wanted to talk about another just small tip, but that's very critical for accessibility. And this is about high color contrast, and being aware of this increases readability for everyone, not just anyone with challenges with vision. So the next slide kind of shows this idea of color contrast. So if you just look at those 6 boxes, you can see that the top 3 have very low contrast, especially for me, that middle one with the light gray on top of the pink, it essentially disappears. The one on the bottom left with the red on green, you might be able to see that clearly, even though it's kind of jarring for me. But if you have any type of color blindness, it would just, you wouldn't even be able to see that. I always like to tell the story of my husband who's colorblind and he doesn't see red at all. And we will regularly go to park, or he will go regularly to park somewhere and he'll just pull in on the curb and he'll not know that it's red. And I'll be like, what are you doing? We can't park here, you know? So this is a real challenge. Now, the two bottom right ones show really strong color contrast. The strongest of all is actually black text on white. Color contrast is just that difference between the text and the background. For example, the slides that Stefanie and I have today are black text on white. That's the strongest color contrast. It doesn't mean that those are the only colors that we can use when we are providing materials for students or our college community, but just being aware of how strong that is and just seeing it all together here, you can see just in terms of readability, which ones are easiest and most inclusive. So I have a couple pointers in terms of why it matters. I think we could probably do, I think there's only 2 bullets. Yeah, so low contrast is a readability problem for everyone. Even if you don't have color blindness, like in the second bullet, low vision affects many people. It also, readability affects us if our eyes are tired, maybe if we're looking at something on a mobile device versus a computer, if we're looking at something, or we're sitting somewhere with really bright lights or really dim lights. So readability really matters, and color contrast is a big component of this. So there are some best practices that we can follow. These are all things that I did not know about. So again, first starting with the highest color contrast that we can use, you can see how easy it is to read our slides here with black text on white background. But the second one is a fault that I was doing wrong for a really long time, and that is to not rely on color alone to convey meaning. So you can combine color with things like italics, bold, capitalization, even increased font, emojis or other symbols. But what I used to do, and if you look back not even that long ago to, let's say, my Canvas pages or my announcements, even my emails, I would put the important things in different colors, just whatever color I felt like, you know, important would be bulleted in purple. And then I would have the important, you know, there's a deadline coming up and that would be in red. But that was the only way that the meaning was conveyed. So if someone's looking at that and they don't see the color contrast, or they're looking at it in grayscale or something, let's say they printed a syllabus and it's in grayscale and it only said important in red, they have no idea that that has been highlighted. So we can still do that. We can still use colors to convey meaning, but we want to just also add one other thing, whether it's italics or bold or an increased font, so that if someone isn't seeing the color difference, they are also getting that important meaning that we want to convey. I want to mention that there's a lot of support with this with accessibility checkers, and I think we have the icon. If you click one more time, Stefanie. Maybe. Okay, perfect. So that little icon of that symbol, it's the same everywhere, whether it's on our Canvas shell, our Outlook email, any other tech tools we're using. If you click on that, it'll highlight for us if we have low color contrast. And most of these tools will not only point out the problem, but then help us fix them. So if it's something that you're just still learning and you're playing around with different colors and you're wondering, is this contrast strong enough? You can click on that icon and the accessibility checker will let you know and flag it if it's a problem. Okay, so this is kind of the good news and maybe the bad news. Color contrast applies to everything. So I have a lot of bullets here just to remind us that in any document, slide, tests, emails, anything that we are doing and sending out, flyers, digital designs, even on social media, it's one of those accessibility tools that once you learn it once, you can apply it to everything. So again, the good news and the bad news, learn it once, but apply it to everything. Now, I told you that whatever I share with accessibility is all the things that I learned and was doing wrong. So on the next few slides, I have my before and after. So this is one of my announcements coming out through Canvas. And I just thought it'd be fun to have a background. I think I had just learned how to change the background, and I thought green is go. So let's go and start the semester and be welcome. You can already see that the green on green is not helpful. And then I've got the important things. I was doing this all the time. I was putting the important phrases in red. So, and especially red on green is problematic there. I put my name in blue, which I used to do a lot, which is a different accessibility challenge, but we know that blue is used for hyperlinks. So usually if you see something in blue and it's underlined, we know if you click on it, it opens to a link. So we really shouldn't be using blue for any other regular text because it can be very confusing and can look like a hyperlink. So on the next slide, it's the exact same information. The content didn't change, just the design. And even if you don't read it closely, you can see right away that it's easier to scan. It's more inclusive for everyone. I still have some things in this deeper maroon color, but I also bolded them and I also put them in italics. You can see that I did all caps for English 101, just used other ways to convey the importance of some of those phrases other than just color. So again, it's a great example of what Stefanie mentioned before. I didn't change any of the content. I didn't rebuild anything. This takes less time than doing all these bells and whistles with all the fun colors and things, just keeping it simple and readable for everyone. I also wanted to point out just what happens when we use professional tools. Oh, before I move to that one, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I just wanted to point out how easy this is to change. This is a Canvas announcement, and I don't know, I really like purple, so I used to do this where I had used the highlight tool to highlight my syllabus link in purple, and then I clicked on the accessibility checker, and it was not okay. But what I pointed out with that arrow is where you see that little circle, it's because it's too light. So not only did Canvas show me what's wrong with the accessibility checker, but I could just drag that circle to a deeper color or a lighter color. And once it's fine, you get those balloons of congratulations that you don't have any accessibility problems. So I love that about many of the tools, especially within Canvas. It not only shows you the problem, it helps you easily correct it if you know to look out for that. Okay, so what I was getting ahead to was this next slide, was that we have to be careful with professionally designed materials. So on the left is a flyer. It's very typical of flyers that come to my email communications. And you can see right away, we all like using Canva. So probably the designer used Canva and has this great template with the icons, and it's set up nicely. But now that we've learned a little bit, at least for me, now I can't unsee kind of some of the challenges here. The red, I'm sure, was used because that's important information to convey, but against that bright orange background, it disappears for me, and I don't have color blindness. There's some things there in blue that are not links that can be confusing. And then on the right, this was a Canva template. I was preparing to work on a slide deck, and we all love the way that Canva designs are sleek and beautiful. But what I find so interesting is that the color contrast is a problem in this Canva template. I didn't choose these colors. I selected the template because I liked the design. And when I clicked on the Canva accessibility checker, they flagged their own template as low color contrast. And you can correct it if you click on each of the problems. It'll take you to another window like the one you just saw, where you could choose a different color to make it a stronger color contrast. But it just shows that we can't rely on these professional tools to be the accessibility checker for us. This is a standard template that they have created. I have a feeling most people don't click on that accessibility tool. And it's just kind of ironic to me that their own template is inaccessible, but we have to be the ones to catch these. And the truth is, in terms of color contrast, it actually takes less time to make something readable, because what I was doing was spending a lot more time adding these colorful bells and whistles because I thought that it would be more interesting, but it was actually becoming less equitable for all of my students. Okay, I think that we're getting close to the wrap up here, which means we have some time for Q&A. We want to end just kind of with a call to action that ensuring equitable and inclusive online learning begins with intentional course design. You got 4 kind of different tips across the spectrum from us, but it's just small changes. So if you think about, wow, the next time I make an email announcement, I will make sure that I have strong color contrast. The next time that I include a writing assignment, I will embed tutoring services in from the beginning, that I'll make sure that we have many ways for students to communicate with each other, that we will think about how we show inclusivity and accessibility from the very beginning of our course communications and our syllabus and our getting to know you materials. And when we do all of that, we ensure inclusive online learning and equity for our students. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A. The slides are there for you to use and to refer to and to share with others. And our contact information is here. But thank you so much for your attention. And any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, or any other tips that you would like to share. We have lots of people on here who are doing great work as well. So feel free to share. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you both so much for this informative presentation. I really appreciate the examples and just how you presented it. It was also, yeah, just how it came through in your slides. Everything was really easy to follow, and also paired with you explaining it, it just became even more clear for me. I'm curious, yeah, do folks have questions or want to add anything? Any tips that you use? We have some
There's some
folks
great
chiming in the
tips
chat.
in the chat. Thank you, Kevin, for adding these color contrast checkers in there. And Christina's mentioned about in Firefox how you can inspect accessibility properties. Marian mentioned about the Chrome extension color blindly. Yes, so there are plenty of tools that support us in all of these. So thank you for sharing those resources.
Anyone else have a related tip on accessibility or inclusive course design? I'm curious a little bit about Canva. Um, are you relying on that at all for course design?
I don't use Canva too much other than making flyers. So I'm not typically making flyers outside of I'm not typically doing flyers for my course. It will be for outside things for the college. I'm curious to hear from Denise or others how people might be using Canva.
I've used it occasionally, but I'm not sure about the reading order. So like it saves things as PDFs or sometimes as graphics, and so then you'd have to create alternative text to make sure that it's something that people could consume in other screen readers and things like that. So I like getting ideas from Canva about ways to lay things out, but then I might go back to Word or something where I can be sure that the um the reading order is already set up, because that's the hardest thing for PDFs.
Mhm.
Yeah, Canva's kind of notoriously not great with accessibility, but we all, kind of rely on it for certain communications. So it's challenging for sure. There was a good question in the chat from Christina about how do we encourage students to make their work accessible, and do you teach them about the tools? Stefanie actually leads one of our professional development. We actually presented on that day one about Create. And I don't know if you want to talk about this, Stefanie. When you have our faculty make things, you actually require accessibility from them as well, which I think is something we can do with our students.
Yeah, I try to. So I haven't used it in the classroom. So I've noticed as an instructor teaching writing and reading, I do a lot of written text. So I do try to give students the option to make videos in discussion or whatnot. Students don't often do it. So that's just something for me to explore. But in this professional development that Denise co-facilitates with me, we do have more opportunity for video and other types of reflections. And so we do ask that if they want to make a video, please caption it. It's nice because Canvas has the auto caption now. You don't even have to request it, but it's not always right. And so we tell faculty, just take a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, and go back and review. And Denise, you say we require it. I don't think we're going to not give them their credit for their participation in the faculty development program, but we really do try to model it when we're working with faculty participants in online spaces.
Yeah, I think require was a little strong.
I wish though, right? Like free do. No,
Right.
I'm just kidding. That would be intense. But I do think it is important to model as facilitators what we are doing and what we're asking for others. I think it's important modeling.
I had a quick thought about that as well. Down in the San Diego region, we just had the SDICA, which I can't remember what that acronym is, but it's for the San Diego region of community colleges. We had an accessibility week. And if you go back, I'll try to grab the link real quick before you hop off. One of the professors, our colleagues at Mesa College, did a great presentation, Kelly Spoon, about math. And she has students do a project with graphs and charts. I'm trying to remember exactly, but she does include accessibility for that. Her students that do that, when they share the graphs and their report, I think they're required or they're strongly encouraged to add alt text to that, and that's embedded as part of how they're graded. So that was a really great presentation, and the recordings are all there, but she really embedded that within the projects that her students were creating. I got a lot of really great ideas from her presentation.
I appreciate the reply Kevin put to the question about when students do have videos, they are asked or required to caption them. Similar to some of what we were talking about embedding materials within Canvas, if we're asking students to do something, including accessibility. So if they are asked to share links or resources, you can include information about having a descriptive link rather than just copying pasting the URL. So I think that we can continue these practices with reminders or requirements, whatever we feel is needed as instructors to model that for students. And sure, some of them, you could say like, make sure you describe the text and here's how you do it. Some of them will, some of them won't. And, that example from our colleague, Kelly Spoon, it seems like it was a part of the assignment and that's a requirement. And it's great that she made it clear. So I think just using, well, anything is a learning opportunity, and hopefully most of our students take it and they apply it elsewhere. And Denise put the wonderful website, our SDICA, and that stands for San Diego Imperial Community College Association. So it's 10 colleges in our region, most in San Diego, but we have IVC Imperial Valley College as a part of our forum, our group of collaborative faculty.
Rob mentioned we had an accessibility review visit last week. The materials they used were not accessible. I'm curious who is doing the accessibility review. I don't think we've had that at our college yet. We need a lot of support as well in this arena. We've been asking for an accessibility expert for so long. I used to be distance education coordinator, instructional designer, accessibility expert, or somebody with both of those skill sets to support us. Oh, you can request it from the chancellor's office. Okay.
Yes, we're very fortunate. I think Denise mentioned it in her introduction, but she's our college's accessibility mentor. We are at a multi-college district, so we have 3 other colleges and they each have their own. So there's been a really good commitment from district and campus leadership to support accessibility. and online teaching. So we've been very fortunate to be continued for future semesters with funding considerations and all of that, but we hope that we can keep having this commitment because it's for everybody and it matters. Another question, does your university offer a site to support instructors with accessibility? Denise, do you want to talk about that a little? So we have mentors. I don't think we have an accessibility office where we can physically drop in, but Denise is much more involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. As Stephanie said, it's related to funding. The district does have a commitment to it. So our district office has an accessibility specialist there. And then there's a mentor at each college. And our job is to, meet with people one-on-one as needed, to offer workshops, to participate in things like the Siddiqa Accessibility Week. And then there is a site that has just been kind of added to over time, but it's a SharePoint site. So I believe it's specific to our district. You have to kind of be logged into it. We have a general website with accessibility, but they've been working on a lot more specialized things where like how to send an email, how to add alt text, how to caption, and just really, because accessibility can be overwhelming, but when you have small little things and there's kind of one link or one page of how to do it for each particular accessibility tip, that's kind of the road that our district has taken with accessibility.
And I'll also share that our district has redesigned our online teaching certification with more of an emphasis on accessibility. So for me, I've been teaching for a long time, even when we had Blackboard at our district before. And so it's been a struggle for me to remediate a lot of my materials that were inaccessible. So as a district and certainly as a college, we're trying to encourage building it with UDL accessibility as we create it so that hopefully it will just be more accessible and correct rather than going back. So PDFs really have gotten me like trying to convert those to a Canvas page or a more accessible text and YouTube videos with their inaccurate captions, right? And so it's important, but it's a real challenge. So I appreciate the questions and the suggestions in the chat. But I hope that, in a few years, we will just have access built into our course designs a little bit more because of the redesign going on at the district.
And it may be faster than a few years, as I know accessibility requirements have been stepped up. And I think there are deadlines for April 2026 or 2027, depending on the size of your local population. I think it's under 50,000, they have until 27, but if it's over 50,000, then it's next year.
Yes, we're April 2026. And Denise did a really great job, and she pointed out that it's not just our online teaching Canvas courses, it's all the distribution list emails, it's the college's website. So I'm learning more about the requirement and the mandates coming through, and I think that that's a good starting point. We want to be in compliance, but it should also be a cultural change and shift. So when an administrator or a faculty colleague who's been teaching online forever sends an email and it's just long URLs, right? You're just like, oh my gracious. And I know we're all busy, so we have empathy and all of that, but it's going to be quite a shift and a lift. We just got an email from our district about a survey related to, I think it might be something accessibility or disability support services related, but I think that's the start of sort of how we're doing this at a district level.
Maybe it's something AI can assist with as well. And I was just
Yeah.
wondering, that's something I wanted to bring in. Our next session will be related to AI. We've had so many sessions on the topic. Have you used AI for accessibility support, and do you find it effective?
There's lots of AI tools that help with alt text. And you can also use AI to kind of run through some of your materials and just ask how, accessibility also involves things like chunking and headers and bullets and lists. So even just running it through, whichever AI tool you like best, Copilot, Claude, whatever, and ask for an accessibility audit of those materials or some tips to make it more accessible. But again, as Stefanie said, it's really great I don't like to look back because I can see all the things I did wrong, and it's just hard to like go back and try to fix them. But the next time you like update your assignment, the next discussion board you make, then you can ensure that it's accessible. And we just do those small steps moving forward, so we don't feel like I can't go back and fix my entire Canvas course. It is a very heavy lift.
Yeah. In terms of getting faculty at least to send emails that are accessible, I feel like that's not a heavy lift, just to like put your email into ChatGPT and say, is this accessible? And then plug it back in. But yeah, people have conflicting feelings still about using those tools. So it's another topic. All right, we are almost at 11:50 California time. I know we have folks from all over in the room. Thank you both, Dr. Maduli-Williams, Dr. Johnson-Shipman, for being here, sharing your expertise with us. It was a very insightful and practical session. And yeah, bravo. We really appreciated having you both. I'll stop recording.